What is up, Wizards fans? Welcome to another Believe in Wizards podcast. I'm Matt Moderno. Got Osman Baig joining me here today. Oz, thanks for coming on. It's been a while since we've done this, so I'm glad we could find some time.
Yeah, it has been, man. Season's coming around the corner, though, so, got to get back in gear.
I feel like a bad football fan because the teams I root for are actually kind of good this year, but I'm already ready for basketball season. Like, I just need something. Last night, we watched NBL games in our house just because I was already tired of Sunday Night Football.
I'll admit that. So I'm enjoying football season obviously now more than I'm normal. As like any Commanders fan, this is different, so it's been fun.
Yeah.
That said, I've always liked basketball, especially early season basketball, because now it's like I'm waiting for next Sunday. I was like, hey, I can watch some NBA Monday, Tuesday. Look, I can even watch it like after the game on Sunday. I was like, I still need my NBA fix,
Exactly. Like when you get that, like college basketball has just started, the NBA is going, and football is kind of mid-swing. Like that is the sweet spot for sports for me for the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, like the tournament and stuff is great, but this is like, while I still care about football, but also basketball is exciting, and the Wizards haven't crushed me yet, so that's always good. So yeah, got that to look forward to. Not a big Commanders fan here personally, but I do root for their success overall. Can Eric Bieniemy just be the Wizards head coach? Like, I feel like that would be.
I think he should be, like his fieriness, I mean, look, he probably, after the season, he could have time,
Yeah. He looks like maybe he's hooped at some point in his life. I could see it.
I doubt he would be handing out championship belts to people for doing their job. Just saying, look, I'm not taking shot. Well, I took a little bit of a shot there at Wes Unseld Jr. But look, I think Eric is a just do your damn job and things will go well thing. And I kind of like it,
Yep. The one thing I'll say about the belt real quick, I don't hate the idea of the belt in principle if just, hey, the best defender can win it every time. But the fact that the best defender can't get it every week and they had to give it out to like Beal to like preserve his feelings a certain amount of the time and stuff like that, that was the part that always drove me nuts because then it became a popularity contest.
It's also just like these things got to be like organic.
Yeah.
I don't know who the first team in college football to have like, when you get an interception, you wear something. But then now everyone's doing it.
The first one I remember doing.
Yeah, like University of Miami. So it's like it's organic there, like. So it's like, okay, when the Wizards drafted Wall, I don't know if you remember this. So I think I had season tickets at that point. Mm-hmm. They did this thing where you had to stand at the beginning of the game until they scored a basket.
Yep.
And it got kind of embarrassing because they were such a bad team that you would be standing for 3-4 minutes into the game. And sometimes they would have to take a timeout. And it's also one of those things like, look, you can't like make something a tradition by just saying, hey, this is our tradition. We're going to do this
now. Yeah.
It's got to just happen on its own.
Also, when like a third of the building is full at the start of the game, it looks worse when they're all standing too.
It looks terrible. Yeah.
All right, so we'll find some good organic traditions. Hopefully, maybe just winning. That would be a cool tradition to follow.
Yeah, winning's cool.
We'll take that. One of the things I want to start reading on the show when we have some time is just the reviews we get on iTunes. Again, really appreciate when people do that. That's really helpful for us. And when people look up Wizards pods and things like that, that's one of the first ways that makes this pod discoverable. So thank you. I know that everyone gets annoyed when people shamelessly ask for reviews, but we're going to keep doing that. So on the end of August, Wizards Trash Talker said, the Atan Thomas episode was great. What an episode. What a guy. Jihadi and Atan have incredible chemistry. Two old friends talking about playing days and weighing in on the state of the league. Atan isn't just some former Wizard either. This is a man, an author, and a serious contributor to publications like The Guardian. Loved hearing him on here. An evergreen episode. Really appreciate that, Wizards Trash Talker. Thank you for doing that. As always, if anybody else wants to leave a review, we love that stuff. Also, we're brought to you by Stateside Vodka and their Surfside hard iced teas, hard lemonades, hard everything. They're all delicious. Again, it's still like we got a couple days of summer left here, so they're especially refreshing. Go out and get a couple. And brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, UFC, tennis, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest, easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting in your favorite casino and card games. Head to the website and use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, let's get to the actual fun stuff here.
I think I tell you, summer might be over. Look, technically, no. I was at a baseball game yesterday. I was wearing my shorts, and I was freezing. And I got home, and I told my wife immediately, I got to go get some sweatpants. So I'm going shopping for sweatpants tonight. If anyone, I'll be at Tyson's, if anyone wants to come out to Tyson's, buy me a pair of sweatpants, I'll be very happy,
Contribute to the cause here, folks.
Yeah, contribute to the cause, but it's just a sign. Summer's over,
I'm going to be in Nashville this weekend. It's going to be in the mid 80s. So I'm looking forward to like a couple last days.
So you'll have a few more days.
Yeah, that's my hope. But Also not mad at hoodie weather either. That's sort of the sweet spot for me. Speaking of hot weather, actually, I have no segue for this whatsoever. Let's just jump into the first topic. I tried. I got nothing.
It was pretty good. I liked it.
The Wizards re-signed Taj Gibson. I don't know. He'll sit on the bench wearing sweatpants a lot. Also, presumably, maybe that's the segue.
Yeah.
I just don't get the move here, Oz. Like, I'm not mad at Taj as a veteran in a vacuum. I feel like I wrote a thing for Bolts Forever 2 months ago saying this would probably happen, but it just doesn't really make sense to me given the context, the rest of the roster. If you want veteran leadership, that's fine. I totally got why Tommy brought in Taj, this like inorganic attempt to be like our Udonis Haslem, because we couldn't even find a guy internally. I think that was a line I stole from you, and it's a really good one. But now it doesn't even make any sense at this point. You've got Gill, you've got Cooks, you've got Gallo, you've got Muscala, you've got DeLon. How many of these dudes do we really need at this point? And you now have to make room on the roster for him, which makes it even more confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, we have 17 players under guaranteed contracts. So 2 of the players that are currently on the roster will either have to be cut, traded as part of like a package, 2 for 1 or 2 for picks or something. And it doesn't make so. When Winger and Dawkins took over, I think it was clear. And look, I don't disagree with this. They want to they clearly are rebuilding, but they're not gutting it down to the studs in an attempt to be the worst team in the league for the number 1 pick in this draft yet. I mean, maybe they might end up there anyways because they don't look like they're going to be a good team by design. But I think Josh Robbins reported that their still goal is to be professional, not really bottom out, and maybe that comes later.
And that tracks with Ted, like the we'll never ever tank thing. Like
and maybe it's just a sales point. Like maybe they just don't want to say what they're doing, but they're actually doing that. But so in that vein, our 2nd round pick didn't sign. He's going to stay overseas. Tristan is not coming over at least for a year. So that's you have some young players that you've acquired. Obviously, Bilal Coulibaly is the most important one, probably the most important player on the roster. You got a couple of those guys from Golden State. You got Ryan Rollins. You got Patrick Baldwin Jr. But the ratio of vet mentor to young player is probably not the way that I still envisioned it.
1-to-1 does not make a whole lot of sense to me.
No, that's even if it is 1-to-1. I mean, look, you got guys who are going to be playing. Jordan Poole is young, but he's experienced. He has a ton of experience. Kyle Kuzma is experienced. Tyus Jones is experienced. Daniel Gafford, young, but there's also a difference where if you really need mentors for young guys, you've had Gafford in the building for 3 years. You've had Denny in the building for now going into his 4th season. You've had Corey's going. If they were really problem guys who need vet mentors, would they still be here?
Yeah, exactly. You would hope not.
So how many vet mentors do you need for Johnny Davis and Bilal Coulibaly? Do you really need that many? So it's the ratio of 1-to-1 or even maybe more than 1-to-1 vet to young player doesn't really add up to me. And it's yes, I get that you don't want to bottom out and, and do all that. But this is kind of where I would, if we were going to sign somebody and make another corresponding move, I'd probably take another flyer,
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm all for having a certain amount of veteran players on the court as well that can contribute, because I think it is the easiest way to evaluate the guys you have long term. I can tell more about what Tyus and Jordan Poole will look like in an NBA context if I've surrounded them with other competent people. Is 37 or I think maybe now 38-year-old Taj Gibson the best way to do that? I don't know. Maybe they're presuming that all of the minutes can go to Gafford and Muscala, and Taj is that break in case of emergency option. In which case, if you don't really plan on playing him, why not go with a younger guy? We talked about this before, but the idea of using that 3rd two-way spot on a veteran, not a veteran big, but a contributing level big and not a total project, I think would have made a lot of sense. You had Usman Garuba, I think, signed with Golden State on a 2-way. You had Neemias Queta, who signed with, I want to say, Boston on a 2-way. That's another guy that could come in right away and been the perfect big body rim protector guy that you need for some of these teams. And at least he's 6 fouls. He's more mobile. There's a chance he turns into something better. And at the very least, I think he's probably more productive than Taj could be this year.
Right. There's no chance Taj is going to amount to anything. And it's it gets redundant. You have Gallinari and they didn't buy him out, even though there were early rumors that they would. But apparently that hasn't even been discussed. So that's cool. And he's a vet who knows how to play and can definitely see. The thing with him is you could see Gallinari and you could say, okay, Danny, here are a few things you could learn from him.
Right. Exactly.
And he could actually show him on the court those things.
Yep.
I don't know who Taj Gibson, he could teach, but he's already been here. It's like,
what's Gafford learning from him at this point?
Yeah, like set a screen. I was like, you already got Gortat there for that, like he's around all the time. So it's like, I don't know. And then you have Anthony Gill who's still here. It's like, it's just redundant,
I think the only way you can really play Gill at this point is as a small ball 5, essentially. And that's kind of what Taj is to me. Like,
what Taj is to me.
Yeah.
Also. And even like Xavier Cooks, who had a good World Cup, probably is a small ball 5.
Yeah. If you have like a real stretch 5 to put him next to, maybe he's a 4/5, like whatever. But he's a big, essentially, for this team. He's not a wing. And
it's like, it's just redundant to me. It's redundant and it's no upside and redundant. Now, who a younger alternative may also not pan out to be anything, but old, redundant doesn't just it's not fun.
Yeah, I mean that's really the thing here. Like, give us somebody exciting enough that we can think like, ooh, here's maybe a young center prospect, or any of the guys from last year, like one of the go-go bigs or something. Just bring somebody back that like we could be like, oh, okay, like maybe we got something here. You finally added a couple guards that we could maybe get interested in, like the Jared Butler pickup. I like.
Yeah.
So who could be the center equivalent of that? That's something like the barrel is so empty here. I don't know, bottom of the barrel guys, like we could get excited about just about anything as Wizards fans, and any of those would kind of make more sense.
Yeah. And look, even a Jay Huff that I think you and I think kind of the hype got a little carried away.
Sure. He would be fine.
Yeah, he would be perfectly fine in this role ahead of Taj. I mean, if Jay Huff is good and there's also on scale. Like if Jay Huff is good enough for a 2-way deal with the Nuggets, he's good enough for our 17th roster spot here.
Oh yeah,
not even our 17th contract here and the 15th roster spot. I think like I would take a Nuggets 2-way player over our 15th player.
If you don't need him for your veteran leadership and you're not expecting him to do much on the court, it's a lot of money to pay out for a 38-year-old veteran, Like the vet minimum for a guy with 10 plus years in the league is a good amount of money. And you've got a 2-way contract with what, $500K? Like it's a much better deal. And not that we really need to pinch pennies at this point, but it just, I don't really know what they're doing, and they're constructing themselves a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think it all counts against their cap. I think to incentivize teams to sign this level player, only a portion of that.
Minimum. Yeah.
But the cash is like, you still have to pay that amount of cash to the guys. So it's like, okay, you took on an additional, $1.5 million than you had to. Sure. Why?
Yeah, exactly. So this is a little bit of a head scratcher. I guess there are 2 guys have to go out basically, essentially now. Any thoughts on who that is? I think ideally we'd both like to see them trade these guys for something. But if 2 people just get cut, who would be your vote to get cut, I guess, essentially?
See, it's kind of different. There's like who I'd want to see go, and then there's who I'd probably cut.
Yeah.
If I had to just straight up like, hey, let's pick someone to cut. I think one is definitely Anthony Gill. And I'm sorry, it seems like we pick on him.
I know.
And he seems like a great guy, but it would be him. Mm-hmm. The second one is a little tougher now. Like, I wouldn't mind. Oh, look, I would cut Taj Gibson.
Yeah.
I guess Xavier Cooks becomes the second guy, but in that situation. But if I was choosing one or the other, I'd probably choose Xavier Cooks over Taj Gibson. Not that I think there's much there, but he looked good in FIBA, and I'd like to if there's anything there,
Yeah, at least you could see if maybe he can be something. We know what Taj is, and he's not going to magically get better at this point in his career. Whereas like Cooks, okay, maybe he gives you some roster flexibility or positional versatility.
Yeah, but if it comes down to just what are you going to do to open up space, I think what I would probably do in that situation is I would look at DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet.
Yeah,
those are older guards. Well, Shamet's not that old, but he's been around, and I think it's fair to say that he's probably not in the team's future plans.
Yeah, I would think so.
DeLon Wright is, I think, going into his age 32 season, or he's going to be 32 at some point this coming year. He's in expiring, and you already have, obviously Tyus Jones. You have Jordan Poole who's going to play some minutes at the 1. There you have options there. How much are they going to put the ball in his hands? How many minutes do you want to go to that? He could definitely help
Sure.
He can help on the floor, and maybe you trade him closer to the deadline. You might be able to squeeze a little more out of him. Shamet, I think, makes a lot of sense because with his you have Johnny Davis, who you have to see. You have to figure out what you have there. You also have Corey Kispert, who could play a lot of minutes at the 2. You have Bilal Coulibaly, who
on this apparently.
they have Bilal, who they've said can play some guard also. So you have a lot of options behind Jordan Poole, and you have limited minutes. So I think probably the most logical are Gill and Landry Shamet, one getting cut or both getting packaged together. DeLon Wright, I think it's clear to say, like, at some point will be traded also this season. I'd be shocked if he's not.
If I'm a veteran, if I'm a contending team who needs a veteran guard, I'm calling DeLon Wright. And I think Zach Lowe even mentioned like Tyus Jones would make some sense for some of these contenders. And I think they're probably more inclined to at least keep him through the deadline. Whereas like DeLon, you could maybe make a case for right now. If somebody loses a guard in training camp or one of these kinds of things, like he'd be one of the immediate calls he would go out and make, I would think. I don't know how much you get for him, but
I think what you were saying kind of makes sense earlier about, and it kind of ties into like it definitely applies to Tyus. Like you want to see competent players so you need some level, a point guard especially, and I think you and I have talked about this, especially in related to like summer league, where like it's only 5 games, but it just really bothers us. When you don't have a competent point guard in summer league,
nobody can dribble or run an offense.
No one can dribble, and everyone looks like shit, and it just really pisses me off. It's like, just get them a competent point guard so we could see if like how these guys look in a normal situation. So for the Wizards right now, Tyus Jones, at least till the deadline, keep him around. He is probably one of the top 3 or 4 players on the team. He's going to shoot well. He's just a competent player that will make life easier for Jordan Poole at first.
Yeah, agreed. Now, if somebody wants to drop a bag, like, okay, then goodbye. But I get way too hung up on like sort of the fringe rotation guys and what they do with them sometimes, like getting mad about like the Jordan Goodwin inclusion in the Beal trade. Like I fully admit that I do that, but I will be pissed if Patrick Baldwin Jr. or Ryan Rollins end up like cut as a result of this. Like, so we could sign Taj Gibson. Like I will actually go on this podcast and lose my shit for some amount of time.
I can't imagine Baldwin Jr. When you asked me the question at first, I was like, I wonder if they would try to move Ryan Rollins to a 2-way. Did they have that third 2-way, right?
They do. It's just, there's no guarantee you do that if you release him and then try to convert him. If I'm him, I tell you to F off and I go to some contending team on a 2-way before
it's just silly anyways to even offer that up to him, like it's like he shouldn't be one of the options they're looking at that. But again, this is also where they got to just clear up some of their redundancies, because at some point you want to see what those guys look like this year. Not now, maybe post deadline, but you want to see Ryan, you want to see Baldwin Jr., you want to see what these guys are. Shamet, DeLon Wright at the beginning of the season might at the beginning of the season might make more sense than they will after the deadline.
Big J52 said, "Hey, I don't know what 25-year-old Corey is going to do for this team except sacrifice his career. Gill and Cooks are not needed either." I'm assuming that's about Corey Kispert. I mean, again, it's the same thing. Like if you want to evaluate what Poole and Kuzma and Coulibaly and these guys look like, you want to do it in a real NBA context. And to do that, you need floor spacing. And Corey is one of like 3 people on the team that can actually shoot. So I don't think there's a world where they're in a big hurry to get rid of him. Now, again, if some team is going to like, back up the Brinks truck to you, like to give you assets in return for him at the deadline, he can, I'll help him pack.
Yeah. And there's no rush with him either, because he's going to still have a year and a half left at the deadline. Yep. So at that point, there's, he's not the team that will trade for him will have a cheap rotational level player. And I'm hard on Corey because just because of the limitations to his game, but there's a value and there's a space for him. I just don't think it's a starter space,
Yeah. I mean, again, like certain rosters he can fit a little better with than others, and where we are in a rebuild, you can go either way with him. I think at this point, he's either young enough to keep as a part of that rebuild, or he doesn't make sense and you trade him for something. But I wouldn't be one of the ones I'm in a hurry to get rid of. Like Shamet can go away before Corey to me.
And the funny thing is Shamet is young, but his salary, like he's already gotten to the point where salary wise, he's going to always be in that MLE mid-level exception plus. So you don't want to invest in someone 27, 28 who's going to cost you early on in your rebuild $10 to $15 million a year. It's just, and also block playing. That's one of those perfect. hey, that's a tradable contract. Let's see what we can work with that, you know?
Those are the players I would never invest in long term, because you could always go out and get value from that guy on the rookie contract as the shooting specialist kind of player.
Right.
All right. We mentioned some of these young guys here, and the person who's going to be tasked to help with their development, at least to some degree next year. The Wizards are hiring Cody Toppert to come in and be the head coach of the Capital City Go-Go. They've had a couple really good head coaches for the Go-Go the last couple of years, in my opinion, in Ryan Richmond and Mike Williams. Both have departed for other opportunities this offseason. Toppert, former LSU assistant. He worked at Memphis for a while. If you all get bored and you go on ESPN Plus, there was a show that they did with Penny Hardaway's Memphis team a couple years ago, and Toppert is featured in that. And he was like their big player development guy, and just a really smart dude. And I know some people in coaching that really respect him. Some of the folks I know from the TBT, he coached a team there a couple years. Just like a really smart, innovative kind of guy to help people not just like dribble between cones very well and do the spider drill a bunch of times, but actually like work on moves and how to apply those in game. So I think this is the right kind of guy. He was the head coach of the Suns G League affiliate a couple years ago in 2017, assistant coach for the Suns in 2018, again, assistant coach at Memphis from 2019 to 2022, and spent last season as assistant coach at LSU. This is a dude that I think will really actually be like a good pickup for them. So I'm excited about that.
It's great. Is he, so based on what you know about him, are his strengths more skill related? Is it, and how much will he be involved? Kind of, I guess this is a general question about the Go-Go coach, because I think they start after the NBA, correct?
Yeah. So usually it's a guy that takes on more of like a player development role, or like a further down the bench Wizards assistant. That's where Ryan Richmond and Mike Williams kind of cut their teeth as like that PD kind of guy. So I think he'll
probably play a role in training camp and leading into training camp.
I would think so. And
okay, which is good then.
Yeah, he'll see what Wes wants to do and learn those kinds of things and what transfers over. And then when their season wraps up, which is typically before the NBA season, they usually kind of shift over into an end of bench role too. So this will be a good move for the organization longer term. And again, I think this is another guy who's like an up and comer in the industry overall. So this is this goes in kind of in line with their other offseason coaching staff upgrades. So I'm all for it. Another young piece here, kind of worth talking about a little bit. We've talked about collecting assets and things like that, and just trying to stockpile as many of those as possible. There's kind of one line I'm not willing to cross to do that, and I've seen a couple people suggest that the Wizards should try to trade for Kevin Porter Jr., who's now on the trading block, in order to receive assets just to take on that contract. That's just like a line I'm not willing to cross, Oz. I think I know you feel the same way about this too, but I thought it was worth talking about that. That's even something out in the ether. It's just not worth it to me, whether you just immediately cut him or not. It's just shady business dealings to have to take on a real, like, honest to God piece of shit to do that. Like, this isn't a one-off or a false. Maybe this accusation isn't even true, but you have a whole track record of stuff and other assault charges and, bad stuff in the locker room to say that this is just like not the kind of dude you want associated with your franchise in any kind of way at this point. Yeah.
And the Rockets would be trading him because they assume there's some level. I mean, I don't want to say what they assume, but because of what happened. So why would the notion just bothers me? The fact that people have said, well, we'll just get picks and immediately cut him. That's cool. Like, what's the big deal? We're just going to cut him right away. You're taking advantage of the situation where he physically assaulted his girlfriend,
right,
to get draft compensation to help a rebuild. I mean, at some point, have some perspective. Have like some just big picture that like you're not playing my NBA franchise mode. You're not trying to just collect picks for your next 2K season or whatever you're doing.
Not a fantasy football or fantasy basketball.
It's not a fantasy team. Like you don't want that bad karma. You don't want it to be looked at as the team. Like these guys, Winger and Dawkins, are new here. Like the whole group here they're new. They have like kind of they're given the benefit of the doubt. Yep. Do you really want to be like? The Wizards don't get talked about much in the media. Do you really want the local media to be like, oh, hey, our new general manager and director of basketball operations took advantage of the situation to get 3 second-round picks?
Yeah.
It's like, no. It's like, you want to stay. This has nothing to do with us. Yeah, don't make it about us.
Yeah, stay as far away from this one as humanly possible. Same thing.
Miles
Bridges thing. Ban him from the league for forever. Once you've seen the pictures of the person that was the victim here, like with the broken neck and things like that, like it's just Like really, that's what you want showing up on the Sports Center ticker.
It's absurd, and it's also like it's like ultimately I'll be shocked if the NBA allows it.
Yeah.
Like this is where, and I don't know if like credit to Godell, but it's just more. He just very simply they have their NFL commissioners exempt list, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at least I think, and I may be wrong, but I think I have it right. Is that whenever anything like this happens, he immediately puts that player on that exempt list, and until they come off, nothing can happen with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what should be happening here. Adam Silver should be like, nothing can happen with Kevin Porter Jr. He is on a commissioner's exempt list. You cannot trade him to dump his salary. You can't trade him for cap relief, and no team can, his contract, everything about him is put in timeout. Let the legal process play out, but he's not in the league. No one's going to do anything with his contract until this is all sorted out,
Yeah, exactly. And
I don't know why they haven't done that yet.
I saw some of the commentary about like, oh, how do we know this is true? Or, everybody deserves a second chance. It's like, there's enough data points here that this guy is like clearly a piece of shit. So let's just move on and not be associated with him, and we'll call it a day.
Also, fourth and fifth chances don't have to occur within 30 seconds of what like happened,
Exactly.
Like it's just absurd, like, yes, there's but you have to show remorse. You have to show that you've grown. It doesn't happen. Oh, let's just give him a second chance 10 seconds later so we could get a first round pick. Also, Winger and Dawkins, if that's what they would need to rebuild a team, then I wouldn't think highly of them, and I wouldn't think highly of their building skills.
Yeah, the 57th pick in the draft you're going to get in 2 years from now or whatever for this is not really going to change the future of the franchise anyway.
Exactly. Right.
And basically, I think everything that happened this summer was because Ted got sick of being like the laughingstock from national media's perspective. So this is the first thing you want to do to get your team talked about of national relevance all summer. It's just
right.
It's a lose-lose for them. All right, moving on to the next one here. According to Hoops Hype's real value metric, the most overpaid players of all time are number 1, John Wall, number 2, Gordon Hayward, 3, Klay Thompson, 4, Tyson Chandler, 5, Juwan Howard, 6, Kevin Love, 7, Dikembe Mutombo, 8, Nicholas Batum, 9, Chandler Parsons, 10, Al Horford. The notion of most overpaid, I have like an actual problem with here, because to me, an overpaid player is someone gave you just a contract that like no one could ever justify. To me, Wall earned that contract. Whether or not he did anything to justify it after the fact, I would strongly argue against. And even if he doesn't get injured, he was showing up heavy and out of shape and like not working as hard anymore. So like it ended up being a bad deal. But to me, an overpaid player is someone that like you threw a contract at that never made any sense at any point in time. Like to me, the Wall contract, I don't really have an issue with. Like it ended up being terrible after the fact. But the worst contract in the league, after a year or two versus the worst contract given out of all time is a different thing to me, I guess. So any thoughts on that list and the Wall being the worst contract of all time in NBA history on it?
I think it's really more so, like you said, it's just labeled incorrectly.
Yeah.
It should really be not the most but just maybe the worst contracts.
How it worked out, how the
contract worked out. This was the worst contract. And you can't really argue that it probably was. John Wall played a total of, I was looking it up all year, 74 games since signing that deal. And now that deal we're actually out of that deal now. That was a 4-year deal, which expired last year. Even last year, the 34 games he played last year were not part of that contract. He was already, I think, he was waived and then signed by the Clippers.
Yeah.
So it ended up being an absolutely terrible contract. I agree with you mostly that at the time he did earn it. And look, he earned it. 100% you earned the deal. Sure. So if you play well, you make the All-NBA team and a team pays you, you've earned it at that point. I think given that he still had, I believe it was 2 years left on his contract at that point.
Did they have to give it to him at that point in time?
Did they have to give it to him? That's the argument. And I think a lot of us, the majority, were happy just because we just came out of the Eastern Conference semifinals. John Wall had his best season in the NBA. So everyone was like, this guy is all about the franchise, all about the city. It's fantastic. He's here. There are voices, and I could even imagine Kevin Broom telling us right now, like he'd be like, oh, actually, I didn't, he's like, I said it was a bad deal at the time. So and I'm not, I know he actually did say it at that time. Yep. He was pumping the brakes. I think Ben Becker, there are a few people out there, and reasonably so, who said they probably wouldn't have done it. I think what the prudent thing in hindsight, and to those people at the time as well, would have been wait one more year, have Wall prove that he could stay healthy more than one season. Because prior to that All NBA season, I believe he had procedures on both knees.
Yep.
He missed the end of the 2015, 2016 season because of like knee surgeries, and that 2016, 2017 season, like, there was actually a lot of questions about him going into it. And then he had his best season. So I probably, it would have been prudent at the time. I think most people would agree here. It would have been prudent at the time. Let Wall prove that he could stay healthy one more year. And then if he does that, if he plays well, let's offer him the super max at that point. That would have been the better way to do it.
And maybe it's semantic, but that's where I keep going back to like worst contract versus most overpaid. And to me, that maybe the second or third best guard in the Eastern Conference for a multi-year stretch getting paid like that, you can't really say he was overpaid. Was the contract bad because of like all these sort of ancillary things that could have gone wrong and things like that? Sure. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just like arguing with the wording here at this point. But the worst contract of all time still seems a little like wild to me. Yeah.
It's because he could actually play when he could play. It just became that he got hurt and he couldn't actually get on the court, And then actually, even though there was a time, I think most people acknowledged, the NBA didn't even give a disabled player exception that second kind of full season that he was out, because I think everyone acknowledged that he was being sat out the full season as they were kind of, to rest for the next season, which never actually happened, which is when he ended up in Houston. So he could have hit the court, played a little more, but, it was definitely bad. It definitely ended up being a very bad contract.
It did not work out well for them, I guess.
But he earned what he got. It just, the argument is, should they still have done it? And look, the argument was like, look, we asked the same question when Beal got signed. Should they have done it? And he had like better health, and he's been a fine player, but it's just, they were chasing something that wasn't here.
That's where I was going to go next, though, is this even the worst Wizards contract of all time? Like, to say it's the worst contract in NBA history is just wild to me, given like the scope of NBA history and how some of these have looked out. Like, you mentioned the Beal contract is arguably as questionable. The Jan Mahinmi deal, again, less money, but that looked bad in the moment. You took a refrigerator with arms and legs and gave him $85 million or whatever.
It also severely handcuffed the upside of that 2016-17, 2017 team.
Which may have been more disastrous than some of these other deals in the shorter term, at least. But honestly, I could even argue that the Gill contract, like the last Gilbert Arenas deal, was worse than the Wall one. To me, like, you took a guy who was coming immediately off of like his knees exploding and gave him that deal when you didn't have to. You kind of competed against yourselves because your owner was like, just here, cut the check.
And he even said he was opting out to opt in, but he must have known what shape his knee was in.
Right, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I think you could argue are at least as bad as Wall. And then they have Juwan Howard fifth on this list. You could maybe argue the Juwan deal is just as bad too. That one kind of screwed us for a long period of time too.
I would argue the Mahinmi deal was worse.
I think so too.
I think because that group had some upside. Like you could have, now ultimately health derailed them, but it was the 2016-2017 149 games. They lost to Boston.
And they essentially had no bench. If you spread that across multiple bench contributors instead of just Jan, who gave you nothing, like that's a different team.
So then what happened was Washington, because of their cap issues, because of the luxury tax, comes back with a worse roster in 2017, 2018, requiring more of Wall, more of Beal, and who knows what led to the injury, like how much more. If you had better players, does that happen? Does he play the minutes? Does Wall play the minutes that he has to play? Does he get hurt as a result?
Didn't Beal lead the league in minutes that year too? I want to say like he was
at least at that point
near the top. He
was definitely near the top for a while. Right. And then does that like lead to some of the leg injuries he's had the past few years? So like if they actually, and I remember the argument that someone reported this, I don't remember the time, that basically once they lost out on Horford, they decided they had to spend the money.
We got to do something here.
We got to do something. So they use it on Nicholson, who then cost a first round pick to dump.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
They use it on Mahinmi.
Right,
on Jan, who played out his contract. But yeah, it was just basically an albatross, like just sitting there on the cap sheet, like limiting. And see, because that team was better, they had Oubre, who has at least become a serviceable player. You had Bogdanovic, who's become he's become much better since leaving here. They couldn't keep those guys. They couldn't, they could have had an interesting team if they were able to keep Wall, Beal, Boyan, Otto Porter, Kelly Oubre. I'm trying to think who else. Gortat. That's at least an interesting group. But you have to dump guys, and you come back with Jody Meeks, and you give up a first round pick, which turned into Jared Allen. This is all a result of that Jan Mahimi contract. The Wall contract, yes, it was bad, and it was one of the worst ones ever. But there was no window. There was no upside for that team. The upside for that team was the 8th seed. The upside for the prior team could have been maybe an Eastern Conference Finals because the conference was not as good at that point. And it was a decent group of players.
I think some of this too, in terms of worst contract, is did you have to give it? If you have a guy that's an all NBA caliber player, even if he's competing at best for a third team, you still probably have to pay to keep them. They didn't have to throw money at Jan Mahimi just to do it. They could have grossly overpaid someone on a 1-year deal if they were so, incentivized to use up that money and not let it burn a hole in their pocket.
Yeah. I mean, he treated it like you said, exactly. It was burning a hole in his pocket. He had to get rid of it ASAP. And not only 4 years for Mahimi, it was 3 years for Smith, 3 years for Mahimi. No, actually, Nicholson was 4 years also. Nicholson was 424, if I recall.
Yeah.
Jason Smith was 315, and Jan was 464.
Yeah.
It's why? Why were you bidding yourself against yourself in doing this? So, I would call that one the worst. In terms of return for your investment, yes, the Wall one was horrible, but it didn't cost this franchise anything, ultimately, because they were bad, and they were going to be bad.
And if he had stayed and played at the level he had played at least it works out for you. Even if Jan had been the Pacers version of Jan, it still didn't move the needle for them in any way, shape, or form. And
I don't know who they were taking.
Right.
Who do they think they were getting? Yeah, they didn't,
I think Jan is actually still younger than Taj Gibson, and he was a very good veteran mentor while he was here. So maybe we could bring him back as well to bolster the bench and add an 18th man to the team. We
are jerks because we keep just ragging on these nice guys. I'm sure Jan, if he was my neighbor, I'd be like, hey man, just come hang out. Let's hang out. Let's shoot around outside a little bit. I'd love to hang out with him. I just don't want him on my NBA team.
His agent did say he would come on this podcast at some point and then totally ghosted me. So I don't feel quite as bad about it.
Oh, you don't feel quite as bad then?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Gil, I think, would be a nice man to have an interview with. So I should probably stop shitting on Gil. This is not an anti-Anthony Gill podcast, by the way. It's an anti-17.
I think if Anthony Gill was on the podcast, though, we'd end up meditating halfway through, in a group circle,
Yeah.
It would just be,
The other kind of NBA related news that's going on right now. One of my favorite TV shows, Winning Time, got canceled, which is a bummer. I just keep thinking about other eras of teams that would make really good television, and you'll never be able to convince me that those mid 2000s Wizards team wouldn't be an amazing television show. It might be so ridiculous no one would ever believe it if they weren't familiar with the story. So maybe that is bad TV, but just picture we just drafted this young second round pick and an Andre Blatch, and now he's shot trying to pick up a prostitute. That seems like HBO quality content right there.
What was that ESPN football show drama that they?
That's exactly what it would be like. Yeah.
Yeah. See, it couldn't be an HBO show. It would have to be something so over the top that the NFL shut down that show. Right? The NFL told ESPN that as part of the deal, you can't do this show anymore. So that's what the Wizards would be. They would just be something so ridiculous on ESPN, 30-minute episodes. It's the shoes. What's on the shoes? And it would just be, it would just be absurd. Yeah. But it would be entertaining. It would have a cult following for sure. And the cult following would be beyond us.
I think so too. Real NBA people would get into that. You could have somebody draft the Alexei Petrov character, and all he can say is "I get buckets, son." The comedy gold could come from a show like that. I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. When imagine you could have a full episode where it's just his teammates' reaction to Andre Nocioni dunking on him. Yeah.
Yeah, or the Jan Vesely draft. He just
Yeah.
making out with his girlfriend on TV. Like it's too ridiculous for like people to believe that that's real content.
Oh yeah.
I've also been rewatching HBO show Ballers too, and I keep thinking of like, as ridiculous as that show is, like some of those kinds of like caliber of things happen to this organization. Like bringing a gun to a locker room, like even that just seems too ridiculous that someone would have done it. Or people trying to kill themselves over or kill each other over the results of a card game.
I know. I really just wish like there was enough interest to like someone really dig down deep and do like a 30 for 30 type thing on what the hell happened here over the past 2 decades. Like it would be so entertaining, but there's just not enough, like we need like a Michael Lee just to get really hyper motivated and just be like, you know what, I'm producing this. I don't care.
I said it when we had
as Michael Lee like lectures us via direct messages whenever you tweet him anything.
Yeah, exactly. Please leave me out of this. When we had Jeff Pearlman on to talk about Winning Time, I said on that pod, like I don't know, if I were independently wealthy tomorrow and didn't have to work, my first project would be to fund that like exact documentary or to write the book on that team, because I think it would be an instant bestseller just in terms of what an absolute shit show it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You can just do a Gilbert Arenas show all by itself, and I think that's enough to get it done. Anything else Wizards related here we need to talk about before we get out of here?
I'm trying to think, like, they're working out. We're really in the quiet time. I think the most interesting thing is going to be just a few things that I'm looking for. Again, what happens with these roster spots? Who's going to get cut? Who's going to get traded? Because someone is, and someone will get traded. That's just, it has to happen. They can't carry 17. They could carry that number into camp, but they can't carry it into opening day. So something's going to happen there. What is their immediate kind of role with Bilal going to be? Mm-hmm. I kind of want to see it. If you made it a point to have a couple of vets on this team, and like keep a Kuzma for professionalism and keep like a Tyus Jones, that type of player, I'm kind of in the whole let's throw him into the deep end, because I think he has the demeanor to take it. You didn't see any confidence issues like you saw with Johnny Davis in his rookie summer league or Danny Avdia with his shot. Like he just it's kind of like I would take the Beal approach. Remember Beal was drafted. They kind of moved Jordan Crawford out quickly so that there was no back and forth. They did not want any overlap and they did not want any issues there. So they kind of quickly got rid of Jordan just so that it could be Beal, and everyone on the team and everyone in the organization knew this role is Beal's and we're going to go with it. And we're just going to throw him into the deep end now so that we could kind of speed up the learning curve. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. I mean, I get to some degree kind of easing him in, but that's like the most, and then obviously between Avdia and Corey Kispert, which one, if either, earn another contract in Washington? I think those are kind of the things that I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can finally see if any of the summer workout videos for Denny have paid some dividends and the shooting is real, then I think that's a real competition for that starting spot. But that's almost what you need to be the case there. But I think that's probably why guys like Shamit and stuff are still around right now, is maybe just to give them some push for training camp, and can Gallo or any of these guys make that competition interesting, and even just like you said about Koulibaly, I'm all for him getting minutes right away. I don't think I would just be here, you're automatically the starter. I think that sends the wrong message, but they need to make it a priority to make sure he gets developmental minutes.
Right. Get him his 20 minutes a game to start, and then ramp it up to 25, then ramp it up to 30. There should not be nights where he's playing 12 minutes a game. I don't think. At least I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's just, not long term at the very least. If you want to do that the first week or two or something to ease him in, I don't care. But that needs to be a priority this season, I think. And the other one is just Johnny Davis. I've been watching some of these videos and promos they've put out. Maybe I've just missed it. I have not seen Johnny prominently featured in any of these little minute-long clips or anything that they're putting out. I don't know what that means. Maybe he's not around, or maybe that's a bad sign for him and how he looks, that they don't have content that they want to show. But I'm really interested in what happens with him.
Yeah, it's a lot of Tyus. It's a lot of Poole.
Yep.
It's a lot of Anthony Gill.
Yeah, love that. Gill is like the third most popular character on this.
So do you remember? And look, I'm sorry. Like Anthony Gill's a great guy, but I'm going to take a shot at him. So I know you're not a Commanders fan. That's a Ravens fans for everyone who who's out there.
Sorry, everybody.
It's there's a lot of Ravens fans amongst the fan base. Do you remember when John Beck was in Washington and he read the
BYU legend, John Beck.
He read the Shanahan book, and almost during that lockout season, he kind of anointed himself as the starter, where he started running his own workouts, and he came in immediately like, "This is my team," and everyone was like, "Where'd you even come from?"
Right.
So it's like I get like with Anthony Gill like front and center and all these like promo clips going out is like Anthony Gill making himself like the star of this team.
He's nominated himself captain of the team at this point.
Yeah, so now I've compared Anthony Gill to John Beck, which might be a good equivalent.
He stuck around long enough and made some millions. I think we'll take it.
He probably hates us now, Anthony.
Yeah,
He probably
I'm sorry,
Anthony if Gill, he knows who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, no chance. Let's probably keep it that way. I don't know. These guys are on Twitter a good amount, but you know what? I'll give Anthony credit for this. If anyone was mature enough to not be like scouring their name on Twitter, I think he's probably the guy.
Yeah, I give him that. And he's probably still recovering from the thrashing that the Terps gave the Cavs. So
sucker. Take that. By the way, I was scared shitless for the first, I don't know, half of that Maryland UVA game, but it worked out. So
it worked out. The second quarter, it's like Maryland remembered, oh, that's UVA. Let's just kick their ass.
Crab cakes in football. That's what we do here in the greater DMV area. All the local football teams are undefeated, which is not a thing I thought I would be saying at this point in the year. So we'll take it. Oz, thank you for doing this. It had been way too long.
Absolutely, man.
Overdue. Everybody, you know the drill. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're presented by betonline.ag, and we will catch you all next time.